Peter and Linda Falloon began Aspara Pacific in 1990, breeding, growing and producing seed for potato, kumara and asparagus. Peter is an internationally recognised authority on asparagus and, along with Linda, pioneered the production of high-health asparagus crowns, supplied to growers throughout New Zealand.
There's about 560 hectares of asparagus in New Zealand now. There's about 40 growers still. The industry's contracted quite a bit. It used to be about 3,000 hectares. But over the years, particularly with competition from Peru and Mexico, where labour is a lot cheaper, areas declined in New Zealand. But it's changed quite a bit now. We're a fairly stable level. The export market, main export market, used to be Japan, but there's less and less being exported and more focus on the local market. We also had a strong processing industry, particularly with Watties and Mount Erin and Hawke's Bay, but it's cheaper to import canned asparagus from Peru or Mexico or China. We've been breeding asparagus in Canterbury since about 1985, when I started off at DSIR, and then in 1990 or thereabouts we set up Aspara Pacific. The main focus of our effort is to produce new varieties for the New Zealand market, so varieties that are selected in New Zealand and so adapted to our particular growing conditions. When the industry first expanded in the sort of early 80s, it was all with overseas bred varieties, and a lot of those have not performed well. Some of them have, but the market is always, or particularly our export markets, are more and more demanding as far as quality is concerned. So the aim was to produce varieties that are disease resistant, particularly Phytophthora resistance or tolerance, and free of virus, and provide growers with high health plants so that they can get off to a good start and maximise their yield.
I've been involved right from the beginning. I have a botany degree and I started out as a secondary school teacher, teaching biology, and as a mother I was not going to be involved in this at all, but anyway then the opportunity arose and I have been running the lab probably for the last 20 years of that time. What we do here is produce exciting new clones that we hope will be world beaters, basically. So that means that every plant that we produce will have the same genetic makeup. So once we've got a winner, we want to make sure every plant is the same. The process to start with is actually to take just a regular asparagus spear. But why we choose that spear is that in the background, Peter is a plant breeder, and he has identified what he thinks will be a good variety further down the line. And from that, I have to produce a sterile spear. So I sterilise it, and then I will dissect it into nodal segments. And we just sit them on the top of the media. So within a week, I'll start to see new shoots and start to see new roots produced out of that. And then in a month's time or 2 months' time, depending on the variety, every variety is different, but we will then be able to make more cuttings. So you can see it's a way of producing a lot of plants, high health plants, in a very short time. The important part and why we do it in the lab is we need to establish virus-free material. So what we get here is something that we know and MPI and everybody else knows has got no disease in it.
The asparagus spears start off about 6 inches underground as buds on the crown of the asparagus plant, and as temperatures warm up in the springtime, those buds elongate and they grow. When they merge through the ground, they change colour from being white, where there's no light exposure underground, to going to green or purple in the case of purple asparagus. That little bud there will grow and elongate. So that can be used in tissue culture, or if you left these spears to grow, the heads start to open up a little bit more, like these two, and eventually those buds will develop into the fern. This is a hybrid seed block of a variety called Pacific Endeavour, which we've released. It tends to be an early variety, and so growers who produce early asparagus get a higher price at the early part of the season, so it's quite useful in that regard. The way we plant a block like this is that we usually plant one row of males, which these ones here, they don't have any berries on it, they just produce pollen, and then we'll have 3 or 4 rows of females, and they're the ones that produce the seed. We introduce bees, both honeybees and bumblebees, and they'll move the pollen from the male to the female, and if we get good seed settle, then we're happy. The nets are to keep the bees in because they really don't like asparagus. They'd rather go and get clover or something like that. And then later when the berries are ripening, they're very attractive to birds. So the nets also keep the birds out.
Peter and Linda's son, Matthew, has also become involved in the business.
I've been back working with the family business for about 4 to 5 years now. Me and my wife did a couple of years in London, where I was working as a physio, and then decided it was the right time to make a move back into asparagus, and it's been a great move. Trying to get good, reliable staff is the most important thing for us. Staff that you can rely on, that you know will get the job done, and obviously because we're kind of seasonal, we don't get the same staff returning every year. So there's always a training period where we have to make sure that they're up to standard. Luckily enough, we've got a couple of really good permanent staff that are really trustworthy and do a really good job, so they kind of guide those new ones coming on. I've seen Dad work his way and get 1 or 2 varieties that were an absolute struggle to get going, but now we're really starting to see some really good results out of our breeding program, which is really exciting for the future. So it was kind of a right time to come in, and for me as well, and just to kind of just continue that on.
Thanks, New Zealand On Air.